French-speaking ones among us. We do have translation. I'll need mine, which I don't see here. All right. And what channel is it again? 2? 2, is everyone finding that works? Well, of course, how would you know now? There's no one speaking in French. So why don't we test them? And please, ladies, sit. And Yamina, say something to the audience in French so we may test.
Good morning, Pat.
All right. So let's hope this works. 1 are other languages, French. 2 is French. 1 is the other language, English. English. Thank you very much for that. So as I mentioned, each of these women are storytellers, and they have used stories to inform their work, but not just their own work, but to change the communities in which they live and work. And that's the way we want to approach the forum's themes. So I'm going to start with Yamina. Welcome. A human rights activist, and as I mentioned before, the deputy mayor of Paris in charge of human rights, the first French citizen from an Algerian background to become a film director and a producer. Welcome, Yamina. Shall we begin with your personal story? An Algerian in Paris looking to her own community for the inspiring stories. Share with us a bit of your own personal, your upbringing, and what led you to film.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I am French, but I come from Algerian background. My parents arrived at the end of the 50s, at the heart of the Algerian war. My father was a political prisoner here, and then I grew up in a town outside of Paris with an inside and an outside, if I may say. Inside, you have the values of very strong nationalism, because you had to go back to that country that suddenly got its independence, and suddenly I discovered, well, it wasn't a discovery, I was French, I felt French. I went to school, I had my own education, my Muslim education at home, with a sense of the forbidden, not saying to the outside that we were going to leave, but the outside was also thinking of you as transiting. And very early, I grew aware of what was wrong in France with immigration, what we called work immigrants at the time. So we weren't quite men or women, we were sort of an informal mass that was linked to the economy.
During this upbringing in which you were feeling somewhat the other, as often immigrants do in every society, feeling set apart by religion, culture, practice, you decided to pick up the camera and find a way of sharing the stories, in particular of women in your community. Can you tell us a bit about the first of those stories and what the purpose was in telling them?
Oui, ça a été...
Yes, very quickly I became aware that women from back home, so to speak, and the destiny of women from North Africa, whether they be in France or back in their country, were facing difficulties. We didn't have great goals because we were destined to be married, and so to a man. Or in Algeria, you also have to know that a woman is always a minor. They cannot get married without a brother, a father, or a man there. And I became revolted by the position of women, and I had to break with my family very quickly, and this was something that was very difficult to get over. Cinema became my new identity, to ask questions to these women, to question these women, and this is what I did with Women of Islam. And I went to shoot in several Muslim countries to ask one question: is it religion that forces us to be under people, under women, or is it custom? Is it where Islam is? Is it the way Islam nourished itself from the culture? Or is it really a part of Islam, part of the text? According to the country, whether it's Iran with the burqa and the veil, the chador, or in African countries where you have excision of hundreds of millions of women in the name of Islam, but nothing is written in the Quran. And I realized that quite quickly, if women didn't take hold of this particular issue, that we didn't have to ask men, that literacy, women's literacy, was really important to teach them what was in the Quran, and that cinema was a great tool so that we could show, we could speak, and we could commit. And this is really why I made this film, because you have to know that in 1991 I made a film called Le Voile et la République, which is the Veil and the Republic in France, and TV channels in France said, well, what does it have anything to do with France? And this was a topic that was a stranger to France at the time.
Now, from that film, one of the early documentaries, that was, I'm quite sure, shocking to everyone who saw it at the time. Let's take a look, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Que pensez-vous de la lapidation?
What do you think of lapidation of women in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, and so on? All religions where women are united through wedding. If a woman makes mistakes, then you have to kill her quickly. If she makes mistakes, then she has to be killed. But I don't think that at the moment it exists. Because we see many women making mistakes, but they're not killed. The Prophet said, Islam is a religion of tolerance. Even for an animal, if you're going to kill an animal, do it quickly.
To this film, it was seen not only in France but all over the world.
Oui, ça a été...
Absolutely. It was seen throughout the world, and for many years I went along with this film to show it and initiate debate regarding this issue. Here, regarding stoning, which is part of the Sharia law, this woman there is positioning herself as a feminist. And she's not talking about abolishing the Sharia law, but instead of taking small stones, it's better to take big stones. So it was a major, essential film, because I went to Libya, I went to Syria, in the Muslim Arabic world, everywhere. And one of the most violent reactions was in Indonesia. Actually, I was not able to show that movie in Guadeloupe, the French islands, because there were 15 fundamentalists there. They came to see us together to tell me that if I was showing this movie, I would not get out of Guadeloupe alive. because I have to be submitted, to be servile. I cannot show that kind of things. So it was a huge fight. You know, you had the people in favor of my movie, people that were against. It was, you know, a big mess. You have to be aware of the fact that it's very hard to talk about this issue, you know, openly, especially if you come from these countries, if you have a Muslim origin. But, you know, things are moving forward. It's like the documentary about the glass ceiling. You know, it makes things move forward on the invisible discriminations, the racial discriminations also. So I do strongly believe in the power of image.
Had we more time, Yamina, we could talk about that film and its impact for quite some time. But things did move forward, and your later films document the changes that were going on within the Algerian community in France, as well as among Muslim communities all over the country. Can we take a look at this next clip, and then you can explain to us how this represents the changes?
I want to organize a march, and I think it'll be many of us doing it. We'll have to ask the town hall for the authorization. We want to ask 1 day per week the possibility to go to the swimming pool only with women. Will the women be veiled? Yes, they are respectable women. What do you know what do you know about all this? What do you know about this woman with a veil? Why did you change? My daughter was not brought up like this, you know. She's wearing a veil, but she was not brought up like this. This is not written in the Quran. It hasn't been written anywhere in the Quran. Anyway, I'm organizing a march, a demonstration. Maybe some of you will like to come with me. Well, in 1970, I did a demonstration, the feminist demonstration for the pill. And now you're asking women to wear a veil. You know, it's not a young woman like this who's going to tell me to go to the town hall to fight for the veil. Well, I've been to universities. I know what I'm talking about. Does it mean that you know more than us? You don't know anything. You know, you went to uni, but you're going to wear a veil. That's complete nonsense. What are you going to do in this demonstration? That's completely stupid. We're all Muslim here. We all comply with the Quran. You don't know anything at anything. You want to teach us life? You don't know anything about life. You know, go off, you know. We don't want to see you again. I'll see you again soon. Don't worry. Oh...
One of the things that it does, Yamina, is it gives us a way to talk about very controversial, difficult, tough, personal, as well as community issues. And certainly that film addresses a very contemporary issue that possibly in your role as deputy mayor, you are also dealing with.
Pardon.
True enough, the world has changed since 1979 and the arrival of the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran, which disseminated a very black, a very dark, a very tough Islam, and who is pretending to be modern. That's something that emerged at that date. We know that the God Party in Iran was also developed with women. We saw in the Iranian society women, you know, talking to the crowds. And this image, you know, was disseminated in the Western world. And today, you know, when we talk about social issues, for example, you know, the housing estates, the difficult housing estates in France are in a dire strait. But there is a human history behind that. Most of the inhabitants in these housing estates come from the Maghreb immigration. So they are Muslims. On the one hand, you have real society issues in these suburbs, these housing estates, and you also have this Islam that developed in these housing estates, and these women that, yes, indeed, went to uni and so on and so forth, but the society is rejecting them because they cannot even, go over the the ring road in Paris. You cannot, for example, be accepted as an internee if you live in the 93 district. So this part of our society has closed unto itself. So this Islam trap. But I'm not going to talk about the same way about my parents. It is not something that belongs to the French society. It actually belongs to a world that is Shiite, that is located in Iran, or to Saudi Arabia. So there is no contact with the Western world. I remember a young Turkish girl in Strasbourg who told me, well, when I wear the veil now, I do not have a territory. I do not have a nationality. And as a matter of fact, when she wears the veil, she cuts herself off from her own family. So there is a reality today in the housing estates, in the suburbs. We talk about the fear of Islam, but I, shoot movies to also show the social reality. You cannot have such a state of things 3 minutes away from Paris. We haven't realized that the fact we haven't reflected upon this, anchorage, this rooting, what could produce. Well, we cannot bury the Muslim, for example, in France, because there is no specific area in cemeteries for Muslim. And this is something that is experienced on a daily basis by the families, and it is transferred over to the young girls. And these young girls now are in conflict with the older women generations, with the image that, you go to a room, you go to speak to other people, and you say, okay, we're now going to talk, and we can ask the right questions. So these movies are challenges, really, challenges to be taken up.
In particular, do open up such a wide and complex set of issues, which regrettably we don't have time to discuss here, but I want to say how important they have been as a forum. So just to help us understand, how did you take that form of storytelling, making films, and move yourself into a position in political, in an administration? Just a bit about that transition.
Wow. I believe that my position as a deputy mayor in Paris Town Hall, in order to fight against discrimination and to preserve human rights, I think it should happen just once in one's life. That is to say, you have to have a delegation that is in total harmony with your work. What I was able to start in my movies, what I was able to say in my movies, with my delegation, I can take actions. And I'm slightly ahead over the administration, because you go there and the administration, is a very cumbersome thing, it's like an anvil. It's the first time we have such a delegation in the Paris town hall, so I have a lot of leeway. And I was telling Izan yesterday the number of things I could decide and undertake in 3 years' time. You know, doing simple things, but, you know, being aware of all the issues, you can go very fast. And when you're a movie director that is very committed, you fight on a daily basis. Of course, you don't shoot enough images because you have to convince the politicians, the public. You have to go and moderate debates where no politicians go, actually. So I feel very comfortable in my position at the town hall because I'm not, you know, drowning in this bureaucracy and this administration works. We are in an ever-changing world with different speeds, you know, 3, 4, 5 speeds, plus the world that is surrounding us, not only about our society, and that's what we see with the Arab Spring, the consequences that will stem from these revolutions onto our societies. So we need to keep our eyes open, and I think the woman's way of looking at all this way of, you know, feeling the air of the time is going to bring a lot to the world. Thank you.
Feel better knowing you're in the City Hall, listening to these stories and addressing these issues. And thank you for sharing your films and your work with us this morning.
Merci. Merci.
Merci. All too short of time as we move with one-on-one interviews with these remarkable women, but they will be around, so it's an opportunity for you to continue the conversations. But I move now to Yuzan Palsy. Many of you know Yuzan because the famous film she's directed, just to name a few, Sugarcane Alley, A Dry White Season, the documentary Aimé Césaire, and The Killing Yard. Yuzan is a great artist who has worked both within and without Hollywood, and that is in itself a very interesting conversation. But I want to go back, Yuzan, to the beginning for you, because you're growing up in Martinique,
Yes.
a long, long way from Hollywood, or even France, where you now live. And you are thinking that even as a young child, there are stories that you want to capture about your community, your family, and even as a young child think film is the way to do it. Take us back to that time and how this dream evolved.
Yes, I think that I was very lucky to have a grandmother who was a great storyteller and who used to tell me when things they don't work the way you would like them to work, doesn't work for you, you can complain about them 1 second, and the next one you need to take action. So that's why when you are Caribbean, you know, you love life and you love to be happy. And I always wanted to be people happy around me. And so the first thing I did, I was 17, I went to challenge the television station in Martinique, the people over there, because there were movies coming from France and nothing about us, no pictures about black folks, nothing. So I went there and I said, why is it? You have all the equipment. And so the head of the station told me that it's difficult, and you know. And I said, I can do it. And that's how it was a challenge, and I wanted to prove him that it was possible. And I did my first movie, The Messenger.
When you were 17?
I was 17, yes.
You cast your family, your friends,
yes.
everyone.
And I even stole, you know, the pellicule, you know, from the station, you know, to the film, and I had a lot of complices.
But the film got you a lot of attention and the opportunity to move to France and
Yes.
study film.
Yes, I mean, people in Martinique, for them, it was a big, it was something incredible. For the first time, they were able to see themselves in a movie because it was a 52 minutes film, and the first actually of the French overseas. And so that created, a revolution, I would say, and they wanted more films. So I decided to go to France and to study properly films because I wanted to be a professional. And I went to Lumière School of Cinema, and I had my degree and as a director of photography to master the techniques, and I did Sugarcane Alley, my first film. But you see, when you are Caribbean, because of my place of birth, because of my history, I carry samples of the world inside me. And I realized very early on that I had to connect those dots. I have to connect the dots between peoples, between countries, histories, continents. And what was the most powerful medium to do so? Films.
And to take the stories that you knew, the stories growing up in the Caribbean, the stories that affected your community, and put them on screen. And one of the first commercial films to come out of that experience was Sugarcane Alley. We're going to see a short clip from it, and then you can tell us about the reactions.
Yes.
Let's see that Sugarcane Alley clip now.
Entrez.
Good morning, Mr. Organizer. Here's José Assam.
Vous êtes sa mère?
Non, monsieur. Sa mère est morte. C'est moi qui m'occupe de lui.
La colonie lui a accordé un quart de bourse. Mais il faudra payer 87,50 francs de scolarité.
87,50 ?
Oui, madame, par trimestre.
Par trimestre?
C'est ça. C'est-à-dire tous les 3 mois.
Tous les 3 mois? Et la bourse, alors?
Quand vous aurez payé les frais de scolarité, et vous n'avez que 15 jours pour le faire.
87,50 francs. Il sera pensionnaire?
Externe, madame.
Externe? Mais alors?
Écoutez, madame, ce n'est pas moi qui fais les lois.
87,50 francs. Ils sont trop méchants. Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un quart de bourse? C'est rien te donner du tout. Mais ils ne savent pas quelle femme de combat je suis. Eh bien, je n'abandonnerai pas ces quarts de bourse. On ira habiter à Fort-de-France et tu iras dans leur école.
Mm-hmm. So, what was it about that story that so captured the imagination and the response? What was that like for you?
Well, Sugarcane Alley in French, Rue Cazenègre, is a story of every Caribbean person. And, that takes place in the 30s on the sugarcane plantation, and that is the coming of age of these young boys. The grandmother who spent all her life in the sugarcane plantation, she understood very quickly that the best way to change an individual, to help an individual to grow, was, and also to change the world, was education. So she's just like she's like a Bertolt Brecht Mother Courage like of woman. She was. So I was 14 when my mother gave me the book and told me, you should read that, And I did, and I was obsessed by those people, and by making a film out of it. Because very early on, as I said, at 10, I knew that I wanted to make films.
So after Sugarcane Alley and the enormous global response to the film, it won all kinds of film festivals all over the world. You were invited to Hollywood and became the first woman, American, well, not African American, Caribbean woman to make films in mainstream Hollywood. What was that like, Yuzan?
Yes, actually, the success, the international success of Sugarcane Alley, 17 international awards, and also the French Oscar that we call here the César for Best First Film, and Venice Lions and Best Actress Award for the movie, yes, brought me to Hollywood. They called me to do something with them. And Robert Redford actually was the first one to invite me to Sundance because he loved the movie. Well, when I went to the States, I went with a dry white season based on Andre Brink's novel. It's about South Africa. And actually, it was very hard.
Well, the first thing you had to do to make a dry white season was to convince Marlon Brando to come out of retirement.
Yes,
which you did
do
successfully.
Thank you.
Well, before Yuzan tells us a bit more about that experience, to remind everyone of this extraordinary film, an excerpt from A White Hot Season.
I would like to recall Captain Stoltz to the witness box.
Good heavens. Some friend will have done that to him to make a propaganda photograph in tomorrow's press.
And will his suicide tonight make another propaganda photograph in tomorrow's press?
Your worship, we are out there every day of our lives fighting these terrorists and communists. And this man here tries to cast unwarranted suspicion on the special branch.
Special branch? I'll give Mr. Peterson the photographs. I'll give you special branch. Thank you. I have photographs here that I'm sure will make you rather proud of your special branch, sir.
He tried to throw himself against the bars of his window. We had to restrain him.
With clubs and whips, I assume.
No, we used no clubs, no whips.
Well, then how do you account for these lacerations, these crisscross lacerations across his front and back?
He must have hit the bars when he tried to jump out of his window. He behaved like a wild animal.
Captain Stoltz, would you have this court believe that this man tried to throw himself through the window forwards, and being frustrated in that effort, he turned himself round and with great force threw himself backwards towards the window?
Evidently.
But would you care to demonstrate that for this court?
No.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the first mainstream Hollywood films to deal with apartheid, the end of apartheid. And for you, the first experience working in sort of mainstream Hollywood filmmaking.
That's right. Well, that made me the first black female director produced by a major Hollywood studio. And I wasn't proud of that because I would prefer to be at least even the 10th ones. You know, but it was for me very important to do that movie because nobody wanted to touch it, and I think that opened many people's eyes. It was very important because we filmmakers, you know, we need to take those stands, you know, use cinema, you know, to educate people, to communicate with them, and show them what the world is about. Sometimes we need to do that.
And you have done that throughout your career, Yuzan. And as we look at challenges, imagination, commitment over the next couple of days together, what are the challenges that remain for you? How do you want to engage this remarkable imagination? And What are you committed to doing?
Well, I mean, I'm doing feature films, but I'm doing also documentaries because I believe that, you know, if you want to make people happy, to help people to have a better life in the world, you know, myself as a filmmaker, I need to use all the powerful medium, as I said earlier. And there are stories that you can tell through films, through feature films, fiction. And there are things that you have to tell through documentaries to give people, the people who are alive, they are witnesses, you know, to give them a chance, you know, the condition to help them to share their experience with you and to tell the whole world that, or the people in the world, that they are not alone, you know, and to give them ideas. And I want here to pay a quick tribute to our grandmother, I would say, our godmother, our warrior, Wangari Maathai, that passed away last month. Yes. Because she taught us a lot and she brought a lot to the world. Yes. So the challenges, yes, I mean, very honestly, Pat and my friends, I would say that the challenges I'm facing right now is very simple. I mean, I think that I have some talent. I have the experience. The stories, I have many of them, comedies. I do this kind of movies, but I love comedies as well. I mean, so the stories are there. The people are there. All I need is the money. The money, yes. That's all I need.
Remains a challenge for almost everyone, no matter what field we are in. But I want to say that recently Yuzan Palsy was honored by President Sarkozy, made an officer with the Award of Merit. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And also...
I probably didn't say that award right. What is the exact name of it?
Officer in the National Order of Merit. Yes.
An officer in the International Order of Merit. And thank you so much for sharing the couple of an enormous biography of films. And we look forward to seeing many, many more.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now, moving to a different kind of storytelling. Catherine Hall Trujillo, as a young woman growing up in the South in the U.S., recognized again the power of stories, not only her own story and what happened in her own family, but the stories of other women during a very important part in most women's lives, and that is the birthing process, the transition from singlehood to motherhood, the transition of babies into life, and created the Birthing Project. This Birthing Project makes this transition time in all disadvantaged communities. It started in the U.S., now includes Cuba, Malawi, Ghana, and Honduras. Catherine is an Ahsoka Fellow and one of the founding women change makers. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you. So take us back to a time in your life when everything looked so dark, so bleak, as if the story had ended.
Well, most people who know me and who know my story know that my coming-of-age story, when I was turning 21, occurred when I was homeless and living in a bus station in Oakland, California with two of my children. And what I clearly remember about that time is that it seemed as if it could have been the darkest moment of my life, but it was also that solstice time when in the darkness the light is coming back and you can't even see it. Because at that point I had walked off and left everything behind me. I didn't want to go to my family because I was embarrassed that I had done everything they told me not to do, and it had gotten me into the situation where I was. And I couldn't stay where I was. That was totally not acceptable and not the way I saw myself and not what I wanted to role model for my children. And so I put one foot in front of the other and went as far as I could, which was that bus station. And in that bus station, I realized that it really was the beginning of a new life. I also realized that I was not my husband's wife. I was not my parents' child, but that I was my own woman. I was my own self. And most importantly, I learned that I could trust other people. Because in the bus station, I was terrified that I was alone with 2 children, and I didn't have any money. And I stayed awake most of the night and walked the streets during the day and then came back. But the people around me noticed that I was there. And when I was sitting there with my children, the men who worked there would come and put a candy bar or a cookie in my lap. I realized that they kind of kept an eye on me, and they pointed me to places where I needed to be and showed me things that I needed to know. And I realized that I was connected to a world, and that I had to open up and I had to trust that the world would be good to me, that the world would be good to me, that I did not have to protect myself forever from all the bad things that had happened and that could happen.
Facing incredible challenges that most of us can't even imagine, of homelessness, no money, no direction forward, no support, you decide to create a project that helps other women, telling your story and then helping other women through the Birthing Project. I know it was a long and complicated story, but explain to us how you've taken your own personal experiences and transferred them to the Birthing Project.
Well, you know, actually the story is not that long and it's not that complicated because like most people, I had one foot in one world and one foot in another. And even though I had married as a teenager and had an unsuccessful marriage, I had also done very well in school. And I think one of the things that I would like for people to have as a takeaway message in my story always is that I am one of those people that society invested in. Someone understood that if you invest in young girls who are mothers, there's a possibility that they will take advantage of that. And so I actually left the bus station, moved on campus from the bus station to the University of California at Los Angeles, where I graduated with honors. And while I was there, I realized that I had to make the way by walking it, that the university had to open up and provide child care to women like myself. Women like myself needed housing on campus. And as importantly, the university needed to tell the stories of women like myself so that we could see that we belonged in the world. And most importantly, back to people helping you and being there for you, the role modeling that got me out of the bus station and got me through UCLA was the stories that I had been told by my grandmothers, my aunties, and by women in the community. So when I decided to make my life's work a profession of helping women, it was really about going back to that thing that makes your life worthwhile. That thing that comes from someone telling you that you're okay. That thing that comes from someone giving you a symbol in a story, a shero, a hero that you can identify with and you can get to that. So the Birthing Project is really about helping women pass on those stories and helping women internalize those stories and then being able to walk upright. Wasn't that hard?
Catherine, I think you just articulated the whole reason why we're doing this session, why stories matter. They matter because they do become the guideposts from your grandmother forward. Now, your grandmother was a rather exceptional woman, as all our grandmothers were, right? But in her kitchen, really, the civil rights movement began, and Arkansas. So you had some very powerful role models, that's for sure.
I had wonderful role models. I had two grandmothers. One grandmother was Cherokee. Arkansas is the stop before the end of the Trail of Tears for the Cherokees, for those of you that are familiar with that part of U.S. history. And my other grandmother was African, and she knew it, and she wanted us to remember it. So the civil rights movement in Arkansas was housed right out of her kitchen. So I had no chance but to know what that was about and to know that I was supposed to be a part of something that was larger than myself.
And you are today, and you'll get to meet Catherine. She's doing a discovery session later in the program. But the Birthing Project essentially works by sister friends come and help women through this transition. And then they tell their stories. And one way they do it, we have here in the middle of the table. And since we're running out of time, I'm going to ask my colleagues to help Catherine and me show this. And Catherine, explain what it is we're looking at and how the quilt is also a way of telling stories.
Well,
I think it goes this way.
Let's see.
Is that right?
This way. Here we go. We're going to turn it this way.
Oh, all right. Stories have to be told in the right order.
The top right here. Oh, excuse me. Here we go. This would be...
You can tell how much we know about quilts. We're holding it upside down.
This is called a sister friend quilt, and as women come into the Birthing Project, both as women who are pregnant and women who are coming to be a support person to that pregnant woman, each one makes a quilt square, and each group is made up of 10 women who are paired with each other. And each woman writes down the name of a woman who has been a sister friend to her. Then she writes down the name of the woman to whom she's going to be a sister friend. And the woman who is pregnant gets an opportunity to write down the name of the woman who is going to be her sister friend in the project. When the baby is born, all the squares are quilted together to make one quilt. So this is one quilt that represents 10 women who came together to shepherd 10 women through their pregnancies. And my hope is that when archaeologists dig up the planet, they're going to find these quilts all over, and it will be a testimony to the fact that women stood up for each other. And so this is a sister friend quilt.
Thank you, Catherine. Yuzan, Yamina, thank you. 3 great storytellers whose work is making a difference in our world. Thank you very much. We have one more treat. One more treat, which I'm going to back over to the podium to introduce to you. A powerful way to end a session about storytelling is to look once more at an artist who uses images to tell her stories. I have the pleasure now to introduce you to Rinko Kowalski. Rinko is the founder of the Tokyo Photo Gallery Foil. She represents one of the new generation of Japanese photojournalists. She won the Kimura Award for young photographers in Japan. Her beautiful photography books and her exhibitions have been in places like the Photography's Gallery in London, the Museum of Modern Art in Sao Paulo, and the Cartier Foundation for Contemporary Art in Paris, too. Everywhere, everyone has recognized that Rinko has a particular eye, a way of looking at her country and its recent events there in a way that I know you're going to enjoy experiencing. Please welcome Rinko Kowalski.
Good morning, everyone. That's my pleasure to participate in this forum, for having good opportunity to show some of images which I should disestablish in Japan. So I'll play a slideshow of the images. When the earthquake occurred on the 11th March 2011, I was at my home in Tokyo, I have been developing some films until just before the shakes. It was very moment. I briefly stopped the printing and was preparing to welcome my friend, who was to come and help me printing. It started from small shakes. Because such small shakes are not so unusual in Tokyo, I wasn't surprised in the beginning. However, it became bigger and bigger. And when it became bigger and than I've ever experienced, I instantly thought Great Kanto earthquake has finally come to reality. The Kanto earthquake is a huge earthquake many scientists have been claiming to happen in a decade. Becoming unable to remain standing, I had nothing to do but sink down to the floor. Then I wondered if I should evacuate from the building in this situation, and jumped out from the front door, hearing many people screaming in their rooms. As no one came out from their room after a while, I thought my reaction was not quite right, and went back to room again. When the earthquake seemed to settle down to some extent, I tried to call some of my friends, but phone connection didn't work. I remembered same happened when Great Hanshin earthquake hit the Kansai area about 2 years ago. At that time, I've just moved to Tokyo, and I myself was safe, but all my families, relatives, and friends were in the Kansai area. The Hanshin earthquake hit in the very early morning. I saw on the TV news when I got up in the morning that the Kansai area was wrapped in flames. But it looked like something happening somewhere in a different country. I called to my family instantly but couldn't get through them, as mobile phone was not common back then. I tried to reach them by calling from every public phone I found on the way to a studio I was working at, but I only knew they are safe in the evening of that day. Calling up those old memories, I came to think that the striking points in other places than Tokyo, and switched on the TV. All the channels were broadcasting spot news on the earthquake. Lots of information was following there, and the situation was serious complication. But I somehow understood that the striking area was in Tohoku. I was watching the repeatedly broadcasted images of tsunami transfixed to stop the work I was doing. I was hard to find reality in those images, beyond my imagination. The tsunami forcibly swallowed everything, slowly and calmly. I could nothing but watching those images, feeling how small I am. I believe who felt such sense of helplessness was not only me, but many people in Japan and the world. The fact that I'm only a powerless small being. When we face the fact, I think energy of moving forward can be easily deprived. How I have lived until now, I felt unsafe as it rocked the ground mentally too. What was the thing I have believed in, or if I had ever believed in anything at all? Didn't I only follow to existing modern system daily, pretending that I don't notice anything? In a few days later, I made to realize that this was truth, having seen the images of the explosion of the Fukushima nuclear power station. I was totally knocked out. You see, I felt someone was whispering so to my ear. In the middle of April, about a month later since the earthquake, I visited some of the striking cities on the coast. Everywhere I visited was just calm. I bodily realized that the calmness involved here. Since I started photography, I have been vaguely thinking that I want to take quiet but strong pictures. Why I was charmed by such quietness? I thought I finally found the answer after I visited those places. It accompanies some kind of here, touching to the truth, requires resolution. And I met a pair of black and white pigeons. If looking closely, you will find that they are wearing footband. Perhaps they had been raised by humans. As I chased after them for shooting, they once flew high, flew around together, and come back to the original place in the end. They repeated this act again and again. I thought they may be looking for their home and master to be back to. Those pigeons looked to me as symbol of many things. The duality of our life, our world and life, black and white, and good and bad, light and shadow, man and woman, like the story of Adam and Eve and forbidden fruit. The beginning of this world may have started with such foreign situation, but that is the beginning of the world. We have to move on the creation after the destruction. Thinking in this way, I thought this disastrous scenery can be thought as beginning of everything. What on earth is the forbidden fruit? Human nature is fundamentally depraved or good. It's just nonsense to discuss which to believe. I had to continue the shooting while asking myself such never answered questions. It's hard to say in words, but I think I encountered a lot of beautiful scenery there. Beautiful, maybe alone. Instead, in this great word, but I cannot find a better word than beautiful. I believe that the word beautiful involves sadness and transience. It's also said that in the old time, ancient Japanese language of beautiful was considered equal as sadness. You may think it contradicts each other in modern language, but it's more than agreeable to me. I believe the word beautiful involves many things. Likewise, I want to think about world through capturing, including such scenery within my photographs. And sharing this sense with the viewers would be my pleasure. This is what I could become aware of by facing to this disastrous earthquake. So this is what I could become aware. I never mean to say there was anything good to experience such earthquake. It was nothing but disaster. But I would say it's an opportunity for us to rethink about our life seriously and to act more subjective. It may be a warning to each of us that we have to recognize pains of facing to the world we live in. I appreciate to have this opportunity to share some time together with all of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinko. Thank you, Rinko, for that powerful reminder of the challenges that your country is facing and for the beautiful images you shared with us this morning. So each of these remarkable women, Catherine, Yamina, Uzan, and Rinko, could have been their own session. Their remarkable stories and their important work. I want to thank them, and I want to thank each of you for your very kind attention for this morning's plenary. Now you get a break. 12 20 minutes instead of 30 because we started a bit late this morning. So have some coffee, stretch your legs, but be sure to come back into this very theater for the opening plenary on energy resources. You don't want to miss that. Thank you again for being with us this morning.